Welcome to part 3 of this SVM Yells About the Fandom short, where I try to answer the question, what was Stanford Pines' fault? This time, I'll be addressing the things that the Gravity Falls fandom blames Ford for in relation to things that happened to Stan. The third caller in part 1 pointed out these. Stanley getting kicked out, / him implying that he'll kick Stanley out when he got back, / not reaching out and helping Stan when he was homeless, / pretty much his treatment of Stan throughout the show. Getting mad about the science fair project. Gosh, there's a lot to say here, and I already spent so much time on Fiddleford. Well, we'll start with Stanley getting kicked out. Stan getting kicked out is Philbrick's fault, not Ford's. Philbrick is the one who threw him out, not Ford. Now, some say that Ford didn't react correctly in this situation. They think that Ford should have tried to stop him from kicking Stan out, and that wouldn't have worked. As this Tumblr post by Kendrick Stermina from 9 years ago, mind you, put it, heroically standing up in such a scenario is a power fantasy. You'd like to think that you'd do it, but the grand majority of people wouldn't. Not at 17, not after a major emotional upheaval, not for someone who just betrayed them. After 17 years of living with such a person, you'd be conditioned to freeze / twitch / shudder when they raise their voice, and Ford was shown to have been on the timid side in his youth. Obviously, Stan did not deserve to be thrown to the street and end up without a high school diploma over one moment of teenage impulsiveness. A decent parent would have given him a stern talking to, explained by what he did was wrong, and given both reassurance and firmness where needed. Of course, a decent parent wouldn't have let the inferiority complex that led Stan to do this fester to that extent in the first place, but Ford didn't do that. There was a lot going on in this moment. Ford, from his perspective, was just betrayed by seemingly the only person he was really close to. He lost his chance at his dream school, the future he was looking forward to. His implied to be abusive by the show father just ran in and kicked out his brother. It's quite difficult to do anything besides kind of freeze in that moment. How Ford acted in that situation, in my opinion, is quite reasonable. Point is, Stan getting kicked out wasn't Ford's fault. It was Philbrick's. Now, fast forward to 2012, at the end of A Tale of Two Stans. Ford says he's going to kick Stan out at the end of the summer.
Okay, Stanley, here's the deal. You can stay here for the summer to watch the kids. I'll stay down in the basement and try to contain any remaining damage. But when the summer's over, you give me my house back, you give me my name back, and this Mystery Shack junk is over forever. You got it?
Yeah, these are some harsh demands, and definitely not something Stan deserves. But again, we need to look at the context and Ford's perspective here. Ford just came out of the portal. He's mad. His brother brought him back against his will via something that could have ended the world. He sees the house / lab he built to study anomalies, his special interest, was turned by his brother into a tourist trap that makes a mockery of said special interest. And on top of that, his brother is doing it in Ford's name. He's been going by Stanford Pines and doing all of this. Ford doesn't even know about the criminal record that Stan has accrued in his name yet.
Stanford Pines loses. Election officials had to disqualify him due to discovery of an extensive criminal record. Crimes include shoplifting, teaching bears to drive, a new crime he invented called burgle-bezelment, first-degree llama-cide.
That llama knew too much.
We will dedicate the rest of this broadcast to listing Stan's crimes. First-degree thermometer theft, pug trafficking.
You can tell Ford was mad here. I would have been pissed. And I'm sure you all who think Ford was unreasonable and in the wrong here would have been pissed too. But I digress. This was in the heat of the moment, and Ford's demands were, I think, actually kind of reasonable. Do I think he should have gone through with them? Absolutely not. Stan doesn't deserve to be kicked out, and the Mystery Shack has its own importance that Seuss breaches in the finale. But given the circumstances and that the house belongs to Ford, I can't blame Ford here. Again, Ford was mad in this moment, and said all of that in the heat of the moment. He doesn't end up sticking to those demands. This Tumblr post by Gravitas Falls is somewhat unrelated, although I still love it anyway. Unpopular opinion apparently, the most interesting and in-character AU possibility for Stan's following Ford instructions in 1982 or Weirdmageddon not happening in 2012 is that Ford would ultimately have Stan stay and they would reconcile more gradually. Think people, Ford never said Stan couldn't come back, and come on, it's so obvious he's given up on the "this Mystery Shack junk is over forever" when he calls it by that name not 3 episodes later. The reason why I'm sharing this post is because it makes a few key points. Ford most likely would have ended up letting Stan stay, especially given that when Ford says he's going to kick Stan out, he doesn't yet know that Stan doesn't have anywhere to go outside of Gravity Falls and the Mystery Shack. And come on, it's so obvious he's given up on the "this Mystery Shack junk is over forever" when he calls it by that name not 3 episodes later, is true. In The Lost Mabelcorn, Season 2, Episode 15, Ford says,
What matters is his powers are growing stronger, and if he pulls off his plans, no one in this family will be safe. Fortunately, there should be a way to shield us from his mental tricks. A way to bill-proof the shack. It can't be! This is a great day, girls! With this unicorn hair, we'll be able to completely shield the shack from Bill's mind-reading tricks.
Basically, I don't think Ford was being unreasonable for his demands he gave to Stan. Still, should he have said that? No. But could he have known that he shouldn't have said that, and can I blame him for doing so? Also no. And do I think Ford would have actually followed through with said demands if Weirdmageddon didn't happen? Also no. As to Ford not reaching out to Stan in between the science fair incident and the portal incident, this one's quite difficult to answer. Ultimately, the best thing that could have happened would be if Ford reached out to Stan during that time, but I can't blame him for not doing so either. The science fair incident was a huge falling out between Stan and Ford. Ford felt betrayed by Stan, the last person he ever thought would try to sabotage him. As time went on, Ford convinced himself that he hated Stan. I say it like that because I don't think Ford actually full-on hated Stan, he just told himself that he did. And when you keep telling yourself something like that, you end up believing it. Anyway, Ford at the very least convinced himself that he hated Stan and had no desire to see or talk to him. The longer this goes on for, even if the feelings subside with time, the harder it gets to reach out to someone like that again. It took Ford being tortured by a demon and losing his assistant, claiming that he trusts no one, to reach out to Stan. And that says a lot, not only about how much of a divide there was between them at the time, but also how Ford never stopped thinking about Stan, and how he never stopped trusting him. Ford says he can't trust anyone, that he doesn't trust anyone. But if he didn't trust Stan, he wouldn't have called him for help, but he did. The more I think about this, the more emotional it makes me. Okay, we need to move on. Finally, the science fair project. Like I've been saying, context and perspective. Ford's perpetual motion machine is busted. He embarrasses himself in front of the people from his dream school and finds evidence of Stan's involvement. Stan at this point has made it clear that he doesn't want Ford going off to college and wants him to sail around the world with him instead. Ford makes the connection, Stan doesn't want me going off to college, to he tampers with my project so that I don't go to college. What happens when he confronts Stan on this?
Man, that Jackie O, what a fuss. Hey, what's the word, Sixer?
Can you explain what this was doing next to my broken project?
Okay, I might have accidentally been horsing around.
This was no accident, Stan. You did this. You did this because you couldn't handle me going to college on my own.
Look, it was a mistake. Although if you think about it, maybe there's a silver lining. Huh? Treasure hunting?
Are you kidding me? Why would I want to do anything with the person who sabotaged my entire future?
To give Stan credit, he was telling the truth. What he did was an accident. But the way he did so, including immediately segueing to, treasure hunting, gave no reason for Ford to believe that he wasn't nervously lying. I think if they shouted their emotions out and finally talked a bit longer, Ford would come to understand what actually happened, but this was instead followed by Philbrick, and you know what he does. Point is, from Ford's perspective, he had every reason to be upset. Stan, possibly the only person that Ford was really close to and trusted at that time, had just betrayed him and was awkwardly trying to cover it up with mentioning what Stan really wanted: to finish up fixing a boat and set sail away from Jersey at the ripe age of 18. I don't say this to be dismissive of Stanley nor his wants, of course not. I'm saying it to point out that Ford's want to go to college was more pragmatic and was a reasonable want to have. Ford never said he couldn't go sailing with Stan later, nor did he say that Stan couldn't go with him to the West Coast. Something I've seen a few AUs of that I think is pretty in character for a scenario where Ford was accepted to West Coast Tech. That's it for part 3. In part 4, I'll discuss Ford's fault in relation to Dipper and Mabel. Thank you for watching.